Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. Today, you have just me, Dan Shapir, your hostess with the mostest, coming to you from Tel Aviv. And with me is Shai Reznik, coming from Israel. Where in Israel? Remind me, please.
Rishon LeZion.
Rishon LeZion. That's
Yeah.
a heck of a town. And we are both here today to talk about all sorts of JavaScript related goodness, specifically about the Qwik framework, about JavaScript streaming, and lots of other great things. Before we start, Shai, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. And we could also play out all the other voices that people are used to hearing, like Chuck and AJ.
Yeah,
Uh,
unfortunately, it's just the two of us here today.
that's okay. They will have FOMO. Hey, I'm Shai Reznik. I'm part of the Qwik team, also the founder of HiRes.io, where we make web development fun and efficient by courses and consulting and such. And I run the larger JavaScript meetup group in Israel, over 11,000 developers.
Wow.
Yeah, and also as a hobby, I do improv and stand up and stuff like that. I like to do entertaining talks all over the world about JavaScript and trying to make it less boring. So yeah, that's me.
JavaScript is not boring. JavaScript is the most exciting thing ever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally agree. Depending on which topics, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's
Um,
so exciting that we're in the process of replacing it with TypeScript.
well, it is kind of the same, right? Like I wouldn't mind if TypeScript was, but yeah, that's a hot topic, probably.
I've heard several interesting points in this regard. One, AJ likes to refer to TypeScript as a superset of a subset of JavaScript, which means that it's a totally distinct programming language. And the other interesting point I made, I think it was from what's his name, Mario Kalina. I think he's the guy. He's one of the maintainers of Node. Matteo Kalina.
Mateo, yeah.
Matteo.
Mhm.
He says that because every different configuration of every different thing you put in tsconfig basically creates like a different programming language. So TypeScript isn't really a programming language. It's a multiverse of programming languages.
Probably, but hey, it helps with the enterprise scale refactoring, so I'm happy with it.
That's for
Uh,
sure. Yeah. I'm wondering how many of your consulting gigs are helping companies transition from JavaScript code bases to TypeScript.
oh no, I think more, by this time, most of the our industry are in TypeScript. I think there was a time 10 years ago or something like that where people still debated whether it's TypeScript or Flow or like whether we should stay with vanilla. I think by this point everybody kind of understand that if you want to do if you want to save a lot of time and have a cleaner code base in terms of like understandability of what this code actually does, I think TypeScript is the default. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. It's just that taking an existing large scale JavaScript code base and transitioning it into TypeScript can be a challenge. So I'm wondering how many organizations are still stuck with either actual JavaScript bases or code bases that they have theoretically transitioned to TypeScript, but in reality are mostly untyped.
Yeah, I don't have the statistics, but I'm guessing like you still have projects with only jQuery or just vanilla JavaScript. Pretty sure they're in the wild, but
Don't
fortunately,
knock, don't knock jQuery. The new version has just come out.
no, then wasn't enough. Yeah, was totally for it. But yeah, that's so TypeScript. I think it's kind of the standard these days, and what's not yet the standard?
What's not yet the standard?
JavaScript streaming. Glad you asked. Uh,
And that's what we're here to talk about. Maybe we'll make it a standard.
Yep, yep. Hope so. Um, yeah. So yeah, that's where do you want to start from the beginning? Like,
Yeah,
how
beginning
did it all
seems like
start?
a good, yeah, beginning seems like a good place to start.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I was born in 1983. No. It's kind of
Wait a minute. You made the big 4-0,
yep. Yeah. I'm old. I,
and you still have
I
your hair.
yeah. I look 16. I know, but I'm old. Older, at least. Um. So yeah, it's kind of t- like the whole JavaScript like streaming a metaphor kind of ties to like my whole journey with Qwik, which was a weird journey. How I got introduced to it, and also how I ended up joining the team and helping
We
out
like
and,
weird
and such.
journeys. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Okay, so I think 3 years ago or something like that. I talked with Mishko Hevery, who created Qwik and also Angular. We've been friends for a couple of years, ever since I gave him a funny T-shirt at NGConf on stage,
Mishko is
making
a
fun.
great guy. I really like
Yep.
Mishko.
Yeah, yeah, Mishko is awesome. I gave him a T-shirt saying "transclusion." I don't think it means what you think it means, or something like that. You keep using that word about the weird choice of words in Angular JS. Ever since then, we became friends and staying in touch. And we talked just before he left Google to join a new startup called Builder.io. He shared with me that he's working on this new cool framework called Qt. And I was like, Qt? Yeah, but you spell it Qoot. And I said, Coot. He said, no, cute. And I was like, Mishko, we need a different name. Okay, let's. Okay.
I will need to digress. There was this movie, like, I don't know, a few decades ago, about this band. I think Tom Hanks was the director, or he wrote the script, and the name of the band was they decided to call themselves the Wonders. It was like a band in the 50s, but they
Mhm.
wrote it like a one, like the word, the
Wow,
number one.
Wonder.
So
Yeah.
everybody would call them the Oneaters.
Yeah,
So eventually the record label just changed their name to be the Wonders, like spelled normally. And
normally, yeah. Yeah, so that was like the weird naming decision at the beginning. And he showed me a demo. He said, "Hey, you want to see a demo?" And if you know Mishko, is very excited about
oh yeah,
showing the bits and pieces of how the technology works and such. So he just like threw all this information on me, and I was at the time like focused solely on testing and TDD and helping companies with that. And I was like out of context of all like the meta framework game back then and all that stuff. So he started like showing me that if you create all these like files manually and encode all the information in the HTML manually, and if you do all this manual stuff, when you load the app, it will be instant. You will have no delay, and you could just do it. And I looked at it, and I could only understand like 20% of everything he said, but I got it that there's some innovation here where you encode stuff in the HTML. Like that was something that I didn't really see before about like framework state that the HTML remembers from the server. So I said like that's cool. Like it's very innovative. And he said like, okay, so you're ready to write some content about it, or videos, or like join. He sent me like a link to GitHub right away, so maybe I could contribute and such. And I had this intuition. You know how you have this intuition where you cannot explain, but you just feel if it's like the right thing or the wrong thing, or like, how we feel about it. So
Hmm.
I was like, I was like, yeah, I'm not sure. Like I was like, mm, yeah, I'm super busy now. I have like courses to create and such, and it's a hard thing, because it sounds it sounded innovative, it looked innovative, but I really, like, something felt wrong. And after the fact, I thought with myself, like, what made me like say not really. And I realized that it was the whole manual thing. Like, I needed to do, if you go through the history, right, and you see, I think you've been in the talk where I went over, like, the history, like the last 20 years of web development. So I showed there that, we went through the cycle of, user experience and, developer experience, right? Like,
We should, by the way, we should probably put a link to the talk in the show notes afterwards.
yeah, there's a updated version of it that I did in JS World, um, from last month. It's
Mm,
supposed to
cool.
be, yeah, waiting for them to release the videos.
Okay.
But yeah, but in short, it was basically, if you think about the last 20 years, we've went through, the MPAs to DHTML, and then, SPAs, like single page apps, and then hybrid apps with like, SSR and the new hydration and such. And every time it was like user experience and developer experience basically fighting, with each other. You want more features, but then you're, taking a loss on the user experience side, and which basically means that how fast that like users can, reach their goal, basically. um
Yeah,
so
I know
that,
what you mean. It's also this whole transition of going from websites to web apps, and what
yep,
does it actually even mean to be an app on the web?
yep,
And of course, going from desktops to mobile. There were a lot of transitions going on, more or
yep,
less at the same time, that all got in the way of providing, you know, holistically good experience to end users, and
yes.
simultaneously making things, let's call it, manageable for the developers.
Exactly. So that was the conclusion that I got to, which is, we strived with all these transitions for apps. We wanted to have a desktop like experience, like for the users, right? Like you click something, it
Mhm.
opens right away. You stay in it remembers what you typed, and all that stuff. You can go back and forth and such. But it wasn't enough, like just focusing on that experience, because developers, what I realized is that developers care about this stuff like user experience, as long as it doesn't interfere with their development experience, right? Like if you ask them to do these extra steps, they will only do it if they have to, right? It's just like some of the developers with testing, they test after the fact because they have to, or it's not really part of the process, because it's extra steps. And when you don't see the benefit of it, or you don't feel the pain yourself, then you just, like, want to focus on what you
In
love to
other
do,
words,
which is the
what you're
features.
saying is that we're lazy.
Of course, yeah, yeah. I think it's a good thing. I
Oh
think,
yeah, for sure.
yeah,
I like to say that software development is one field where procrastination is often a good thing, because maybe you end up not having to do it at all.
exactly. If you wait long enough, maybe the browsers will implement signals for you.
Exactly.
So, so, coming back to that point where I said to Mishko, like, well, I'm not sure and such. It was because I had this intuition, because there was like the developer experience was lacking, right? Like I had to do all this manual stuff, and I thought to myself, well, nobody will want to actually do that to just shave off like a couple of milliseconds of the loading time. It's not really a big problem, and I don't know, wasn't excited about it. Now, like a year went by, And I offered my help along the way in terms of like advice and trying like ideas and all that stuff, but they didn't have really time to get involved. A year went by, and because of COVID, we started doing remote talks in our meetup group. So at one of those remote talks, I invited Mishko to speak about. We had a meetup about like future frameworks. So invited Mishko to speak about now Qwik, not cute, but
Still
it was
spelled wrong though.
yeah, yeah. Still with a twist, yeah. So I invited him to talk about that, and I was like in a much busier time at my life, even like before when we talked, like a year later, I was super busy with like managing a business and uh, trying to juggle between like course recording and new clients coming in and employees and everything together, and having a family and a wife and two kids and such. So I was like late in the evening getting a call from my wife like, are you coming home, I need help. And I was like, damn it, I forgot that we have this meetup today with Mishko. We're supposed to like come out, online, join us in a half an hour or something like that. And she was like, "Okay, I will take care of the kids." Okay. So shout
Your wife is a saint.
Yes, shout out to Noga. I love you. Thank you. So we had this meetup, and in that meetup, he showed Qwik, the new version, and he went through all the explanation and stuff. But he showed something completely different than what he showed me a year before, because he said, "Well, you just write this JSX, and that's it. Everything is done for you, and you can just like get the instant loading app." And I was like, where are all the manual, like writing of stuff and inventing your own like file names and stuff like that? And he shared that during that time he was joined by two brilliant developers, Adam Bradley and Manuel Almeida,
They
from
are
the
brilliant, by the way. I
yes,
totally agree.
yes,
They are two of the most amazing developers that I know.
yes, exactly. And they both came from Ionic and created Stencil together. So they got excited about he got them excited about Qt or Quick, and they got excited also about the potential to automate stuff, like not just getting the result, but also not just getting the user experience, but also getting the developer experience. So that's exactly what they did. And Manu, when he joined, he created a compiler called the Optimizer. Basically, he took all the manual steps and codified them and wrote a tool that does that for us automatically, like all the extraction of files and renaming of things, and really really hard problems to solve, and how to extract closures into their own files, which is also a very difficult problem to solve. So together the dream team solved that problem and created the new version that he showed in the meetup. And I was like, now it's interesting. It's more interesting. I was still busy with all of the stuff, but I took a mental note and said to myself, well, I will check it out. Like I will take my
I
side
totally
project and
agree that
Mhm.
it's kind of necessary for something like Quick to succeed to be developer friendly, because at
Yes.
the end of the day, if the goal is to get good performance, but I have to work really hard for it as a dev, then I might as well work really hard on it from React or something.
Hmm.
It's like the benefit of something like Quick, from my perspective, and I think Mishko has also presented it this way, is essentially falling into the pit of success. Is
Yes.
I want to have the same challenges that I have working development, doing development in other frameworks, maybe even less if possible, but the same at the most,
Hmm.
but automatically end up with much faster web applications or websites. And
Exactly. That's the like the barrier of entry at least should be
exactly,
at least what you're used to, if not way better way simpler to develop even. So and one of the advantage that the team had back then in their disposal is that they were starting from scratch basically, so they just could like take inspiration from different solutions and start from that point, like taking reactivity, although it was really essential part to be able to do all this stuff, but also like looking at all this like tiny developer experience happiness that you got from different frameworks and bake it into this framework to make sure that your starting point is amazing. And so I took that, a couple of days later I took a side project, a website that I had, and with like a little bit of interactivity, and refactor it just as a POC, just to test the water, let's say. And then I deployed it and test it on the page speed stuff, like to see the result, and I got like 99 or 98 or something like that. And it had JavaScript, it had like stuff in it, and I was like, what? Like I couldn't believe that I just wrote JavaScript and I got this score without manually optimizing anything. I used to like, like wrap stuff with like, with wrappers to
Yeah, do
caching, and
all the
yeah,
shenanigans that we do.
exactly. So I had this emotional, wave coming through me, like, again, this intuition again struck me, but this time on the positive side and not the negative side, of like, wow, if I have this feeling, it's like I want this to be my future as a web developer. Like this is what I want everybody to have to experience. So this must be the future in terms of technology. And when I looked more into it and spoke with Mishko and all that stuff, he said that in order to bring it to all of the rest of the frameworks, they would need to make a lot of breaking changes in the ecosystem, also like the API and all that stuff. So it's very 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 hard to do, and it will be like you know like in
Yeah,
the past, nobody likes the big migrations and stuff like that.
yeah,
So
I spoke about this with Mishko as well on occasion, and he basically said, I think that initially when he came up with this idea of streaming or resumability, I don't think he was using the terms yet at the time,
mhm,
but as an
mhm,
alternative to hydration, the problem that he was really looking to solve was the performance cost of hydration, which we might touch on in a little bit. I've spoken about it in the past, but it might be worthwhile to speak about it again.
mhm.
But he thought about initially doing it, I think, in the context of Angular.
Yep.
And he very quickly came to the realization that it was just not doable without changing not only a lot of Angular's internals, but actually changing the API, or the way that you actually use Angular. That it couldn't stay Angular. That it would be like that transition from Angular uh,
1 to 2.
one
Yeah.
to two, yeah, all over again. So you might as well start with something fresh. And as you said, picking JSX, it basically looked at what was the kind of effectively
The,
industry standard at the time, still ongoing,
yeah, the most popular.
which is still React,
Yeah.
and basically embracing that as like where to start in terms of what the developer experience kind of feels like, even though it's not exactly the same, and we can touch about other differences between React
Yeah.
and Qwik in terms of the primitives and the developer experience.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So basically, well, this is a good point, because that's basically how I came into, like, once I had this epiphany, I went to, like, I scheduled a call with Mishko, and told him, hey, like, I want to help. Like, you remember when you asked me like a year ago, and I didn't have time, right? Like I was busier, but I know I had a wife that was no, about to divorce me for taking yet another project.
project.
Yeah, jokingly, yeah. But yeah, but I was still like having this, invisible force, pulling me towards like, hey, I really want to get involved, I really want to be part of it. And I a- as I said in the beginning, I come with a lot of experience in, like, creating communities and being part of, multiple communities along the years since the 90s, and seeing what makes a good developer community and what makes you know a bad community, a
Let's not
developer
call them
community.
bad. Let's call it less successful.
No, I specifically, I'm not talking about existing developer communities. I'm talking about communities in the past that I was part of, which were very toxic, and they are not existing today because of
Mm,
that. So
I
that's why I
understand.
call it bad. So I and in between, you have always, like, nothing is perfect, and you have in between. But I learned lessons from it, and I really, really wanted, for Qwik to have a very friendly community and very helpful and very beginner friendly, and place that people feel comfortable asking questions in and helping each other and grow. And I knew that it also will help growing the framework in terms of the ecosystem, because people will, feel much
Oh
better about
yeah,
creating stuff.
undoubtedly promoting a new framework is an uphill battle. First of all, we're kind of spoiled for choice. I think
Hmm.
there are like what, 8 major frameworks, maybe even
Hmm.
more. Uh,
Hmm.
and I'm calling them major frameworks, but the reality is that React, for now at least, remains the undoubted king of the hill. I think React represents, just React on its own has as many websites, I think, in the Google Chrome user experience report as all the other frameworks put together.
Hmm.
So undoubtedly pushing or promoting a new framework is, like I said, is an uphill battle. And yeah,
Yeah.
did you, by the way, did you actually join Builder.io or did you
No.
stay? So
No.
you're kind of like a contractor, a helper. What?
No, I wasn't. So as I said, I had a business and employees and, obligations and all that stuff. And I looked at it, from the beginning. They talked about the project as a community project. Like they needed it for, their products, and that's why they invested in it. But they always talked about it as, being a community driven project. And so I said, like, hey, I will join as a community, I don't know, devrel, or, contributor to the community, because the team was small at the time. They didn't have anyone, focusing on that, because they were like working very hard on getting to, version 1. So I started helping with, writing the community values, and making sure that everybody feel welcomed, and, started creating these groups, and highlight certain people who are, extraordinary in their contributions, like creating the quick heroes and community leaders and meetups all around the world. And I was focusing on mainly on that. And also started, I knew that, in order, like you say, it's a uphill battle. And I came at it from a different perspective in terms of, like, let's say, the other solutions. I view all of the other solutions, and it wasn't a pun, as one big JavaScript family, basically, because I come from mainly the Angular community, which is also very friendly and very supportive. And I have lots and lots of friends there. And I see other communities as well, which are very, very friendly and very helpful. And everybody basically is working towards the same goal, which
Oh
is
yeah, for sure.
to make our lives better. So since the beginning, one of our values, that we set was making sure that people in our community don't, talk badly about other, frameworks or solutions, uh, from this mindset of one big JavaScript family. And
Except for
you can
Vue, everybody hates Vue. No, I'm kidding.
I actually was like in Jess world in Amsterdam last month when I gave my talk. It was mainly, I think, Vue developers and lots of the Vue ecosystem project like Nux and Vite, and everybody were so friendly. Gave me the same exact vibes and feelings from the Angular
Yeah.
community, which I mostly, have been to the Angular events. So that was another confirmation that we're all just one big JavaScript family. And people are arguing over developer experience in terms of syntax and stuff like that, which is fine. Everybody has their own taste, but together we can march forward as a group and try to make the web better. So I help. I offer my help with that and start getting more and more involved. Um, and one of the things that I offer to help with, because I have a lot of experience in creating courses and education and such, I I noticed that the way that we are explaining Qwik is lacking, or it's too complicated, and we're losing. I felt that we're losing a lot of people along the way who are not yet experts at
Hmm.
JavaScript or the frame or the ecosystem and all that stuff in order to understand like why is it cool. So me and Mishko recorded a free course called a Qwik Introduction, and we recorded it in one day, but then it took me like 5 months to re-record parts. After, like, the more I learned, the more I saw how we could simplify stuff, and that's where basically the JavaScript streaming metaphor came from. It's the metaphor of streaming came from Mishko at one of the talks that we gave together in Poland, but I wasn't. I insisted into trying to name it JavaScript streaming so we could explain the metaphor, and let me try and explain the metaphor to the viewers. Okay, so just like what is it? Um, so remember back in the day when we wanted to see a movie, we had to download the entire movie, gigabytes of
Yeah.
file,
I
right?
was there. I'm old enough to have been there.
Yeah, and before that with VHS and all this stuff. But anyway, I wanted to legally, of course, download the entire video,
Only
and
legally.
yeah, only legally, and just to see the end of the movie, or to continue where we left off. But today we're not doing that anymore most of the time, right? We have something else, right? We have streaming.
Streaming.
Yeah, so we have Netflix and YouTube, and it's really easy to jump to the end or to the last point where we stopped, and just to continue watching that. And that metaphor, in a very simplistic way, is the metaphor behind the innovation behind Qwik. And so, in order to like just compare it, because you asked about hydration, just in one sentence, hydration is basically um, the act of rerunning the JavaScript framework on the client side after, like, to make sure that the HTML that gets produced by the server, which is done by the server side rendering, in technologies like Next.js or Nux or any hybrid technology that runs like renders on the server, it produces an HTML which has no logic in it, and then the framework needs to rerun again on the client and in order to make this page interactive. That's
Yeah, that's
basically
yeah, that's the funny thing is, and a lot of people I see still don't understand that point. That when you
Mhm.
use server, so I'll pull back just a little bit, if you excuse me, just to give a little bit more context. When people
Yep.
moved to frameworks like React, the initial approach, or Angular, the initial approach with these frameworks was to actually do all the rendering on the client side. So in the very old days, we would render everything on the server side using something like PHP and send it down, and then augment it with jQuery or something like that. But if we wanted something that was really a more sophisticated application like behavior, and we needed much more sophisticated interactions, we needed something like an Angular or React. But what we ended up doing is doing all the rendering on the client side. And then we would initially just deliver a blank page, then download all the JavaScript, then download all the data, then run the JavaScript, produce the UI, and only then will we start downloading things like fonts and images and stuff like that. So the downside with this approach was that we had the blank page effectively for a very long time at the beginning of the process. And this was especially bad on mobile where things are obviously slower. So people would literally look at the blank white page for multiple seconds, even longer in some cases.
Yep.
I've seen longer.
Yep.
And then we got SSR, like you mentioned, which basically said, okay, let's take this JavaScript in React and run it on the server, produce the HTML, and then instead of sending down a blank page, we'll send the initial view from the get go. But like you said, you got just essentially an HTML. It's like a picture of the website rather than the actual functioning website. And the crazy thing is that hydration process, that in order to make the page actually interactive, we had to effectively regenerate that initial HTML on the client side. So we still had to download all the JavaScript, all the data, rerun it. The only benefit really was that the user at least had the page to look at while all this stuff was going on.
Yeah,
And
the
that
perceived performance.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That if it happened quickly enough, then by the time that user actually tried to interact with the page, hopefully, that hydration process will be done and the page would actually be functional. So the user wouldn't actually notice that delay. Yes.
Yeah, and I was challenging, like in the course that we created. By the way, you could find it on quickschool.com. It's free. You can just watch it. On that course, I actually challenged Mishko about this point, and because he was saying the same thing. He was saying like, well, people can wait for like 30 seconds to interact with the page. And I was like, get out, like nobody's waiting for 30 seconds. And I actually experienced it later on myself by waiting, being with the low reception or something like that, or connectivity, and waiting for like some very very simple page with some interactivity to load, and it was taking forever and forever to load. And I was like, nope, not
But
buying that.
even if it's not forever, even if it's just a couple of seconds, so before I'm currently working at Next Insurance, had nothing to do with Next.js, and prior to that, I worked at Wix. And at Wix, when you're looking at the Wix site on a mobile device, you usually have a hamburger menu. It's really common in a lot of websites. But for the hamburger menu to work, it used to require the hydration to finish. So you would get the initial view of the page with the hamburger menu, but before the hydration actually finished, that hamburger menu wouldn't actually do anything. So it's worse than a slow website. Is from my perspective, it's a broken website because
Yeah.
the users tap on that hamburger and literally nothing happens.
Yeah.
And that's like the worst user experience that there is. Or think about a website like a product page with a purchase button, then you click that purchase button and nothing happens.
Yeah.
It's like the worst possible experience. If I click a purchase button like once or twice, I would be afraid to click it twice because I'd be thinking I don't want to purchase this product twice.
Yeah,
And
add to cart like twice instead of
yeah,
once.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
basically just bounce.
Yep.
So
And
so
and and the point here, another realization that I had is that you don't see it when you're developing locally or you're just testing out like a small demo. It only bites you when you reach a certain point of an app size, and then it becomes an issue because then all of the dependencies that you added to increase your or to improve your developer experience, like this npm package that does this and this npm package that does that, and you combine all of them, and all of a sudden this is part of your global shared dependency that needs to get downloaded as the first dependency for the hydration to finish up on every page. Then it becomes a nightmare to try and then analyze the bundle and see what are the biggest npm packages that you can maybe replace, I don't know, moment.js with date functions to increase, like to make it more functional,
Yeah,
and all that stuff,
it's
right?
what we said about falling into the pit of success. It's this is exactly the opposite of that. It's literally
Yes.
falling into a pit of vipers. It's
Yeah. So
unless you actually invest potentially significant effort, by default you'll end up with a bundle that includes everything,
yeah,
and that bundle by definition can be pretty big. I've seen multi megabytes of
yeah,
bundles,
and
even
that's
gzipped, compressed, and whatnot, still multiple megabytes.
yep.
and
And that
and
ties it back, by the way, to the metaphor of like video downloading. This is you as a user downloading the entire video just to hit play, and waiting all this time just to have the video playing or do something, right? um,
yeah,
and comparing that with streaming, which is basically how Qwik works. This was like when I try to looked at my definition of like the generation of technology innovation in technology. I was like, generation one was the MPA that you talked about with the PHP, rendering. Generation 1.5 was adding a bit of JavaScript on top of it, like the dynamic HTML or something like that we call it. Generation two was single page apps, and generation 2.5, because it was again a layer on top of the single page apps, was the hybrid. At least those are my definitions. It's not like scientific.
mm,
Now i I try to think about like, okay, what's coming next, and what's coming next should be a completely paradigm shift, compared to what it cannot be just an improvement over what we already have. It needs to be something completely different. And it took me a while, but when I realized how Qwik works or how JavaScript streaming works, I realized, we have in this a completely different paradigm shift. And then it hit me why what Mishko was talking about the philosophy of
so
automatic optimization, basically, that you get all the optimization but automatically done for you. So if you want, we can dive into how JavaScript
yeah,
streaming
so
works.
so we said, just to kind of put the point of where we are. So we said that with regular SSR, the problem is that you get the initial rendered view in the HTML, really quickly, but
Mhm.
then you have to, like you said, like downloading the entire movie. It's like getting the first frame of the movie. You see the first
Yep.
frame of the movie, but to see the rest of the movie, to even the second frame, you need to
You need to wait.
download the entire movie and wait for the entire movie to finish downloading. And that's what you get with most frameworks that use hydration. Now, I've
Yep.
actually given a talk at React Next conference, for example, talking about various different strategies that some frameworks have come up with in order to address this cost of hydration. Like, you might get something like progressive enhancement, which means that some functionality can work before hydration actually happens. Or you've got technologies like React Server Components, where you can specify that some components, being essentially static, don't need to hydrate, but anything that is dynamic still does need to hydrate, and stuff like that. And what you're saying is that with this JavaScript streaming approach, you're getting rid of hydration completely altogether, no hydration anymore, but you're still getting all the benefits that you can build web applications that are as interactive as you know those classic single page applications written in React or Vue or whatever. So can you
Exactly.
elaborate on how this magic kind of happens?
Yeah, 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 definitely. So just like in video streaming, okay, when you have like a big file of video, you want to chunk it into packets, right? This is basically when you upload the video to YouTube. This is what happens behind the scenes, and through the technology of the server and the client, it gets streamed, it gets chunked into, encoded into a format, and then chunked into packets, and then these packets are being streamed at the client, the like based on the point that of the movie that they wanted to watch, and it get buffered, right? When you pause the movie, it actually buffers the next couple of packets, or the next, I don't know, 20, 30 packets, in order for you to have like a smooth experience, so you won't have like the, loading spinner every time you want to watch it if you have a slow connection. So that's the same way that Qwik, and with the Qwik optimizer, the compiler that Manu wrote, works. You write your app in a very familiar a very familiar syntax and development experience. Sorry. And then um, Qwik, in its syntax, comes with like built-in markers that you don't need to really think about most of the time, because it's just built in the syntax, which are dollar signs. Mainly, instead of a component function, you have a component dollar function, and that's it. You just have to use that. You don't have any other choice. But this is a marker for the compiler to know which functions it needs to extract into these packets, right? Like this tiny chunks of JavaScript. And you can think about all these functions as being extracted into different tiny files automatically. Now, it's smarter about how to bundle different stuff together, but conceptually, you get these packets on the server on build time. Okay, it happens
So
on build
basically,
time.
what you're saying is that you've got this thing that's kind of a cross between a compiler and a bundler, which does essentially a static analysis of the code, and
Mhm.
the code also includes hints or directives or instructions. So some of it is basically just looking at the code, but some of it is looking at special directives that are embedded within the code, like the component dollar that you just mentioned.
Mhm.
And using this information, this compiler slash bundler is able to break the code into pieces that are effectively can be streamed essentially independently, I guess, of one another when they're actually needed.
Yes. And it's not really a bundler, it's more of like an unbundler or an extractor, right? Like it's the opposite of a bundler, because it just takes the code and knows how to break it apart into these packets, and also how to create two different versions, one for the server side rendering and one for the client, or the client that needs to be
So
rendered.
I use the term bundler because most of us, when we deploy code into production, we're used to using this thing, which takes a lot of JavaScript files, the source files, and then generates from them usually a lot fewer numbers of
Yeah,
files that are actually JavaScript files that are actually delivered. Having really funky names with hashes and
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah,
And what you're saying is, in this case, it's not really a bundler because the number of files the sizes of the files, put aside the number, but the sizes of the files that get generated are actually often smaller than the
yeah,
original source code files that we created independently. I'm not talking, all of them together. I'm talking independently, even
yeah.
each and every file, because
Yeah.
you're just looking at, like units of code that need to be executed together.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you extract all of this into different tiny files, and so the reason we needed bundlers to make, like, to concatenate everything into, or to bundle everything into, fewer files, is because of the limitations of, HTTP. We didn't want to, load all these files together, because then it would get blocked, and we have a bad user experience on loading time. So we wanted to chunk it into a single download, not to pay the cost of the extra, like,
That,
requests
and
and stuff like that.
also the fact that a lot of the code usually works synchronously.
Yep.
You have function A calling function B, then function B needs to be bundled with function A, because the assumption is the way that the code works is that they
It's
need to
there.
be able to run together.
Yeah, exactly. You're totally correct. Um, so getting back to, so you have this packet on build time. It creates all these, packets, and it creates like a manifest of, like, basically a map where, which location, like the packets map, let's say, and then it takes it. And when the user requests a specific route, um, Qwik then on the server side analyze which route it is and produces, instead of let's say a static HTML with just like a freeze frame of the of the first frame of the video, it creates what I call a smart HTML, meaning the HTML that knows all of the interactivity points, of the possible interactivity points in that page, and it analyzes this like packets map and realize, oh, these packets belong to this page. So it um, create a set of instruction and encode it into the HTML for the browser to know what to do next, like how to preload these interactivity points or packets, or necessary packets. Now, then it sends that only that HTML over the wire. The user then loads it in the client, and then starts the next thing, which is the buffering part, like the video, right? So Qwik spins up a service worker, or basically utilize this service worker, and hands it off this list of the tiny packets, list that it needs to buffer or to prefetch in the background in a separate thread, right? So that way it won't block if the user wants to, interact with the page or something like that. It won't get blocked. So you basically buffer all these pieces. And then the last point of this metaphor of JavaScript streaming is that now when the user will interact with the page, instead of lazy loading the piece, like let's say it like clicks a button and add to the cart, right? Like your example from before. Now, instead of waiting for that code to load only on interaction, the code is already there because of the service worker. So then Qwik also does something that no other solution does, which is called lazy execution instead of lazy loading. So you just execute that code on demand. And because everything in Qwik is basically set up to work asynchronously, that means that it could do it in every different point in the app, meaning that nothing gets hydrated or loaded on demand when the page loads, but every single event in the page could conceptually become the initial main method or the entry point to the app to start the execution of just those parts of the app. Now, Qwik actually smart enough to also buffer the next couple of pages, so you always get a smooth interaction. So just to complete it, instead of it's more, so a website is not like a linear video, right? It's more like a quest. Well, depending on the user, events,
Yeah.
it you choose your own adventure thing, right? So if you start your life on the cart page, let's say, or you click on that button, you will end up totally different in a different location. So Qwik is smart enough to know how to buffer in 3 dimensions in terms of like where the user progresses, so they always have a smooth experience, just like a single page app, but everything will be super, super efficient. And the developer won't have to think about any manual optimization. That's the philosophy behind Qwik and behind JavaScript
Yeah,
streaming, which is called.
I think that's a really important point, because
Mhm.
so a couple of important points actually. So one thing is actually our last episode that we recorded was with Rich Harris, the creator of Svelte, and it's not something that we spoke about with him, but I recall him saying, I think it was him, that kind of had this critique of lazy loading things. He said that he often browses while he's commuting on, let's say, the subway where there's little or no reception, and he opens an article, and when it lazy loads stuff, he just loads it before he goes on the train, and then because it uses lazy loading, by the time something is needed, he doesn't actually have the reception, and then that stuff doesn't load. So you're saying in a sense, you're doing lazy loading and lazy execution, but because you're using this prefetching mechanism or preloading mechanism with a service worker, the stuff will be there when it's actually needed. So it's downloading in a non-blocking way. It's not blocking execution or responsiveness until it downloads, but it's also not just being loaded lazily only just when needed. It's being loaded as soon as possible without blocking. So
Yeah.
that's a really important thing. And the other important thing is when I was at Wix, and we had one of the problems that we had was that um, Wix is a website builder, and you have, like, in the Wix editor, you could pick from hundreds of different types of components like buttons and menus and sliders and galleries and whatnot. And one of the problems we had was that the initial implementation downloaded all the possible, we bundled together all the possible components that you might have on the page. Now that kind of worked initially when Wix had a few dozen components, but then Wix had a few hundred components or a few thousand components, and
Yeah.
and it got to the point where it was ridiculous. So we had to start thinking about how to break it up, understanding which components go together, which components need each other. Like, for example, a menu item is needed by a menu, and so forth. Uh, but we kind of automated it, but we had to do all the heavy lifting ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
we as Wix, we could invest a lot of developer resources into it, but it was something that we as Wix needed to do. We didn't get it out for free from the framework. What you're saying is that with Qwik, you get all this goodness automatically, and it's even lower than the component level. It's literally at the, let's call it, event
Function.
handler level, or
The
function
function
level,
level.
or
Yeah.
function level. That if you need that function will only be downloaded if
No,
and when it's needed,
no,
but
no,
it will.
no, no.
No, I'm not phrasing it correctly. It's bundled separately, so it can be downloaded all on its own. It will be,
Mhm.
and it will be downloaded in a non-blocking way so that it will be available when it's needed.
Yeah, you can think about it as eager buffering and lazy execution. Okay, that's how I
Oh,
like to
cool.
think about it.
That's
Right?
a cool way to phrase it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not so eager loading is like we all like the all these have this connotation of, oh no, it will block the website. So that's why I call it eager buffering. So it's more obvious that it's not blocking the main thread, and lazy execution, because then yeah, we only execute that code because part of the execution is also what blocking stuff. So yeah, that's so the philosophy behind Qwik, which is automatic optimization, philosophy, I think is one of the most important things in a technology. Like if you have a good philosophy, all of your technical decisions basically are drive or being driven from that philosophy. For example, implementing a feature that will turn something into a more manual optimized way is against Qwik's philosophy, which is automatic optimization. So we will think really, 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 really hard before we'll introduce another, feature into Qwik, which will make it less automatically optimized or auto optimized. Now, that's what, like, when I think about the future and where things are headed in terms of like the the different solutions, I think that everybody is working towards a future where they want to automatically optimize as much as possible. I think that currently Qwik, in terms of the technology, because it didn't have the baggage from like supporting like backward compatibility and all that stuff, it was in a unique point to both improve the developer experience, but also make sure that things are being done automatically as much as possible. And that's why I think that Qwik currently has, a doorway to a much faster future, which everything is automatically optimized for you. And what I showed in my last lecture is kind of another epiphany that we got by thinking about how we can take this philosophy and this innovative, paradigm shift, and actually imagine how the future will look like using those tools. So, do you want to hear about like?
Yeah, for sure. I love to hear
Okay.
about the future. Does it involve AI taking over the world or something like
Yes,
that?
of course. The future is AI, and we won't have any jobs, and that's basically the yeah
Well, look at it this way. Our fear today is that AI will take our job. Our fear, like a few decades ago, was that AI will terminate us. So at least,
well, it first it will take our jobs. Then let's talk. But yeah, so yeah, obviously, AI is a big, important part of our future, and I think that um, you know, it will be an interesting next couple of years to think about, or to see the development of frameworks and how they better incorporate themselves with the use of AI and large language models and such. Now, in Qwik, for example, since the get go, ever since we realized that, well, things could be broken down into a function level and could be buffered and or in a predictive manner, so to say. So Mishko and the team actually started talking about and speaking about this idea of what if we could, gather or track anonymously, not with any identification details and such, only the hashes of these packets, like for users, in terms of like which packet gets loaded before which packet. And that way, we could take this information, feed it to a model, and build the most optimized order of packets for each page. Meaning that if you land on the cart page, everything gets buffered in the perfect way, so the users will always hit the cache and not a delay when
mm,
when you need to load. So that was a dream, a year ago. Now it's a reality. It's called Qwik Insights.
wow.
Yeah, and it actually is being used in the Qwik Docs. So Qwik Docs is using Qwik Insights, which is, you can think about
But the
it as the.
analysis needs to happen per website, right? It's on a per website level.
Of course, yeah, it's per website, it's per app
So
basically,
if
and
let's say I'm using something like a quick city, you're saying you're using like built-in telemetry, as it were, to gather information from the field about, that particular website, in which order the various downloaded packets are being needed, and then
yes,
optimizing the order of delivery to best match the order in which the packets are being used. It's like an
yes.
elevator anticipating which floor it will be needed at, and trying to be as close as possible to that floor by the time that it's needed.
Yes, and
Request.
basically, this is what we call predictive buffering. Like, it tries to predict based on the average usage. Oh, these packets goes together with those packets, so let's make sure that they are either bundled together or loaded just right after, or buffered just right, one after the other, so they will all be there because this is the most likely path that the user will take, right? So up until Qwik Insights, um, the framework did it in sets of heuristics where, if it's below the fold, it will, put it after, and will buffer the, stuff above the fold. But now it's a reality, and using that, I looked again at the lecture or talk that we had in our meetup, where Mishko visited us, to record the course on Qwik School. And we did a meetup about Qwik, where he revealed for the first time Qwik City to the world and announced that they build a meta framework. Um, i- in the end of the event, we had a talk by Benjamin Greenbaum, very, another brilliant developer, is a core team member at Node, a very very experienced developer who did like half parody, half truth talk about the future of frameworks, like how like the framework of 2030. That was like basically his talk about, and it was a half parody because it took like a framework, an imaginary framework called Quicker, and and it showed like all the possibilities that what we'll do in a couple of years, and with lots of ideas there. And he didn't, I don't think he knew at the time that Mishko has been thinking about this like Qwik Insight thing, like and thinking about how to do that. But a lot of his ideas who looked imaginary, now we started thinking about them as reality because Qwik Insight already works. And then we thought, okay, we have those statistics. So what else could we do with those statistics? Now, mind you, those are statistics based on the function level. That means that you could theoretically, it's not currently being worked on, but theoretically, you could produce automatic end-to-end tests because you know the set of actions and their order that the user are taking. Maybe there
Mm,
are, so you could potentially create or get to a point where you can generate automatic end-to-end tests. Another thing that developers don't like to do, but now based on the actual user usage of your app and not just you making up stuff. And then we thought about what if we could take those tests and use them as a feedback loop for the AI model to now automatically optimize your code base for you, meaning seeing which code parts are not being actually used in production and removing them, creating an automatic A/B test with them to see if they are needed or not, and then just eliminating code from the code base. Another AI team member that could refactor your code and all the code technical depth that you have, to refactor stuff to make stuff cleaner. You could use all this stuff and feedback loop based on this ability, because again, the ability of JavaScript streaming to track stuff on the function level, which wasn't possible in an automatic way before. So these are the kind of stuff that we are thinking about in terms of like when you think about the future of the web and the future of the framework, and what else we could leverage and such. And I would love for all the solutions to have this, so we could, like I said before, we are all one big, JavaScript family of web developers. I want everybody to experience this automatic, feeling of I can just focus on building the features and doing like cool stuff in the UI or the server and stuff, and not worry about all the stuff.
so we're
Around it.
coming on close to the end of our episode. Before we finish, though, there's one issue that I would like to address, and hopefully we can do it fairly quickly, even
Hmm.
though I think it's a non-obvious issue. Now,
Mhm.
suppose so. Here's the thing. Let's say I'm a person listening to this podcast, and I'm saying, "Wow, this is really great. I'm really excited about the vision that these guys at Qwik have, all the cool technologies that they're creating, AI, whatnot." And I really want to start leveraging that, especially since we already have a React application that is using hydration. And if you're using hydration, then by definition, you have like poor startup performance or loading performance unless you take proactive steps in order to remedy it. But here's the thing. I've got this existing code base. It's written in React because, React, like we said at the very beginning, is like the king of the hill, more or less like all the other frameworks put together. And how do I get from this existing code base in React to leveraging the capabilities of Qwik? Do I need to wait to a new project, or is this something that I can gradually transition to? What steps can I take?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And up until now, so since the beginning, we had the ability of quickifying React components, meaning you can feed, a quick. We have a quick React integration package, and you could basically get a function that takes a React component and quickifies it, and that means that you can like use your existing React components inside of your quick wrapper or quick application. Now there are other strategies that you can use. So far we had the challenge of, so we had this from the beginning, and I helped a bunch of companies um, use this strategy in terms of like that's the strategy that they chose to use. But we kept getting more and more demands to, like, people really wanted to take advantage of Qwik in terms of like all, because if you do the quickifying thing, you still are, you have like delayed, let's say, hydration, but you still are suffering from the same stuff that you described. So what we focused on is to work a lot hard and with a lot of community members to make sure that we're building also native solutions to Qwik for a lot of stuff. For example, a UI component library which is fully accessible, and has also the best of the developer experience innovations that we saw from like a project like ShatCN. So we created Qwik UI, in order to remedy that, and also invested time in helping other community projects in order to make sure that, so the first part or first step is to quickify your existing component. The next step will be probably to replace them with a native to Qwik components, for example, that you could leverage the JavaScript streaming ability over your app and slowly move. But this is now, like, from this point onwards, this is one major key thing that we want to educate about, like taking all of the lessons learned from the past year and a half of applications doing that, and starting to create migration recipes on how to do this stuff. And we just like started the process, so we don't have it ready yet.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's definitely one of the key things that we want to focus on. So you could do that. You have the ability to do that with Quickify, but we want to have a more optimized, let's say, or education material, because you have different strategies for different scenarios, micro front ends and how to rewrap stuff, and all that stuff. So yeah, that's what we're going to focus.
I think another important point which I mentioned was that if you're not using hydration, if you're building, let's say, a dashboard that is part of some sort of, I don't know, a legacy, an enterprise legacy application or whatnot, and you don't care so much about loading performance, then it's a different story. But if you're in a place where you're leveraging hydration, you're using something like a meta framework, an XJS, a Remix, or uh, a Nux or whatever, and you're using hydration, then you should be caring about the hydration cost, the hydration time, and then and any solution that you might be looking at, be it React Server components, be it islands of hydration, whatnot, all of them come with a certain amount of development and cognitive overhead. So it's not like you're going to be able to make any of these transitions for free. And if it's going to cost you, then you might as well be looking at something that's probably going to give you the most bang for the buck. And Qwik looks like a really good candidate in this regard. Now, before we finish, let's say I've listened to this podcast. Sounds really interesting. I want to kind of get involved in the Qwik community to learn about this, to be able to start playing with it, to get it the relevant resources and whatnot. What's the best way to go about it?
Okay, so good question. First of all, to learn about it, we have our website now. It's quick.dev, or we have the free course that I mentioned, quickschool.com, where me and Mishko goes deeper into the details behind it and exercises and all that stuff. And to be involved in the community, you go to qwik.dev/chat, which will take you to our Discord. Come say
Mm.
hi. We have lots of helpful and friendly people in the community. If you have questions, people will help you. Our goal now is to make sure that as many companies are successful using Qwik and implementing Qwik, because as you say, if you have already a lot of things to learn and a lot of manual optimization to do to get in order to get to those performance, it will only scale. And so you need to think of yourself, which solution will scale better with time in terms of like when the app will reach to 50 megabytes, 100 megabytes and such. Would you like to be in a position where you upload a video to YouTube and then you need to manually cut the video on YouTube and choose which part delivers to the client, or just upload to YouTube and have it automatically done for you? I think that's the decision that a lot of CTOs and decision makers need to think about, and where they evaluate the next project. So come get involved. If you need help, DM me or anyone on the team, and we'll get you um,
Up and
help
running.
and up and running, and make sure that you're successful.
And if people do want to DM you, contact you in general, what's the best way to find you specifically?
So you can stalk me in the street, or Twitter, Shai_Reznik, or in Discord. I'm always on Discord, on the Qwik Discord, and you could DM me there, or Twitter, or Qwik School or highres.io and all the stuff that I'm involved in.
Cool. So the last thing that we'll do, as we always do on this podcast, I
Picks.
is the picks. Yeah, I forgot to remind you about it. So, but it seems that you've come prepared. So
Nope.
uh, I'll give
I
you a
mean,
little bit of time to prepare by starting first.
okay.
So I don't have a lot in the way of picks for today. So I have just the one thing, more or less. I'm not really big into anime or stuff like that, but it turns out that I found this series on Netflix, which I like, and it's actually the Wikipedia page says that it's an anime influenced fantasy science fiction television series. So it's animated and it has a kind of an anime style, but apparently it's not exactly anime if it's anime influenced. It's called My Daemon, not demon. It's daemon. It's spelled Daemon. So it's my daemon. And it's like about this world in which, as a result of some unexplained occurrence or accident or holocaust or whatever, the monsters called daemons have kind of infiltrated our existence, and people really loathe them and hate them. But on the other hand, they're very useful because they have these kind of weird capabilities, like to negate gravity or induce sleep or turn invisible or stuff like that. So people use them. But there's this kid who adopted one, and he actually really loves it for some reason. But of course, they are being chased, and he's on the run. And it happens in Japan because anime. The artwork is really great, and also the stories are so far are pretty good. I'm enjoying it. So as I said, it's called My Daemon, and I'll put the link in the show notes. And that's more or less my picks for today because I didn't come very, very prepared in this regard to our episode. So, Shai, maybe you can,
Yeah. Yeah.
provide a bit more.
Good choice. I also wanted to pick, but I will pick Matt Damon, the actor. He's not an anime, but he's a good actor. I like him. Uh, so I also have a good Netflix show that me and my wife are watching now, which called The Gentleman by Guy
Oh, yeah,
Ritchie on
I
Netflix.
actually picked it a couple of episodes back.
Yeah, very good, very
Yeah,
good
it's
show.
actually it's
But
a Guy Ritchie show inspired by a Guy Ritchie movie.
Yeah, yeah. It's have that distinct taste. We didn't. We're now getting to the last episode of the the first season, so no spoilers. But that's one of my picks. Another pick that I want to pick is something about Angular. So Angular signals and the new versions of Angular are amazing. You should use if you have an Angular app, you should totally upgrade and use them. It makes the development experience super great, very fun to work with. So yeah, I want to give a big shout out to the team who worked hard on implementing it. I wanted to also pick Solid Start, which reaches almost 1.0, I think RC now. Also, team who worked super hard on getting there. So shout out to Ryan Carniato and the team.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
Ryan Carniato is a good friend. We've actually had them on this podcast several times. So if people are interested in all the exciting things going on with Solid, they can listen to those episodes. And we probably should have him on the show again as soon as they finally release version one.
yep, definitely. Totally love this guy. Um, and also yeah, I wanted to re-mention maybe some of the stuff that I said: quickui.com, quickschool.com, all the stuff that you need in order to be successful with Qwik. We now had also a big announcement that Qwik is becoming more community driven project, meaning that we'll start seeing more activity and more more companies supporting Qwik, and lots of great and exciting things that our community members have been asking for quite a while now to see. So we're now doing all the stuff that we're waiting to do. So yeah, exciting times, and can't wait to see what the
Yeah,
future bring us.
good luck. So
Thanks.
Shai, thank you very much for coming on our show. It's I've had lots of fun. And thank you very much. And probably have you on again the next time there's something really exciting happens with Quick. And with all the community effort, probably exciting things are ahead. So
Yep.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.